I won't actually do that many teeth. Okay, so we are recording.
All right. Thank you for everybody that's joining us. We're about to start here in a few minutes. We're just going to let more participants come into the meeting today, the webinar today. If you're just joining us, we're going to give about a minute or two to make sure everyone is here for the webinar. Thank you once again for joining us. We'll get started in just a few minutes.
Did you guys hear the doors shutting? No.
All right, so we'll give maybe another minute. This will be recorded. It will be posted on our YouTube channel, which I believe Katie just posted into the chat box. Katie, if you want to, and Katie will be posting it again at the end as well. All right. It looks like we have most of the participants that are logged in right now. We'll give maybe a few more seconds. Barry, it looks like we have a request for to check the cartoon that you had up. I don't know if you want to wait.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
If you're just joining us, welcome. We're just waiting on a few more participants to log in, and then we'll go ahead and get started. We are also up on Facebook Live, so thank you if you're joining us from Facebook as well. And once again, all of our discussions and presentations have been posted on our YouTube channel. This one will also be posted on our YouTube channel. And the channel has been posted in the chat box in case you're curious. It looks like we're still getting participants coming in. The presentation is Dam the Water and Pray for Rain. Do not be fooled by the first screen. We will talk about that, I promise. All right, so we are at 12:03. So I am going to go ahead and get started. So hi everyone, my name is Justine. I'm a museum educator here at the History Center. I want to thank you all for joining us today for our latest presentation in our San Diego 101, the History of Our Region webinar series. And the History Center also wants to extend a very special thank you to our members for all of your support. We definitely couldn't do this without you. Now, before we begin our presentation, I do want to go over a few things. So our speaker, Barry, he will answer questions to the best of his abilities at the end of the presentation. And please use the Q&A function that is on the screen if you do want to ask the questions. We will be pulling those questions from there. And like all of our presentations, this presentation will be uploaded onto our YouTube channel. And if you have not seen the previous presentations, those are already up on there. There's a link in the chat box to that YouTube channel, and I'm sure Katie will post another link at the end as well. So now we can go ahead and get started. So our presenter today is one of our community historians here at the San Diego History Center. So this is the one and only Barry Goldlust. So Barry, the screen is now yours.
Okay, thank you, Justine. Welcome back for those who've been here before and new attendees. You're not misreading this first slide. It's our attempt at a public service announcement for everyone. Please make sure that you do wear your masks. It's very important. This pandemic has lasted far longer than many people had hoped. And for the most part, we don't have any excuses not to wear a mask. There were very a few exceptions to this year, so I would like to just make that plea again. Keep safe, wear your masks, keep the distance, and just be well. So we are here because of the San Diego History Center and the two museum sites that it operates, one at Balboa Park and the other one at Junipero Serra Museum. That's the extent of my Spanish for the day, with a huge collection of documents at the Balboa Park site. Hopefully we will be open in the near future and you can partake of that information. So thank you for the History Center and for having me here to make this presentation. Yes, this is the real title, Dam the Water and Pray for Rain. And what the title really conveys is the fact that as many of you know, whether you're natives or not, sometimes we have lots of rain, most of the time not so much. And we do go through droughts, drought periods, and this has affected quite clearly the history of our area. And pretty much this Mark Twain quote, I think, holds true. There have been many more fights over water transfers and water water sources in the history of our region. We do a lot of fighting over this here, and you'll see why as we kind of develop the story. There's always water in the news. There's always something about the weather. 2020 wasn't a very good year for information and headlines about water and the weather. Something called COVID and something called politics seemed to get in the way. I did locate quite recently a headline, Water Content of California Snowpack Lagging. And who knows, can we be headed for a drought? Well, we shall see. We do have a real border emergency, and speaking of politics, but it's not the one that we've been hearing for 4 years. It's the issue in the Tijuana estuary with sewage and chemical spills contaminating our coastline. That's been an ongoing problem and continues to be, although the two border governments, and the federal government has made some attempts in the past to come up with a plan. So I turn this thirsty for paradise. What brings people here? Well, down through history, the common factor has been the climate. I came here not necessarily for the climate, but in part. I was very surprised when I started listening to the um, weather forecasts and how intricate they were, because they were talking about all these microclimates. It took me a little while, but I did finally acclimate to the microclimates and found how important these forecasts really are. Uh, Going from the coast to the desert, the dramatic changes in climate. We have a relatively arid area along the coast. Even our average temperature, average rainfall, probably about 8-10 inches. Although you go into the foothills and the mountains, some areas get as much as 30 or 40 inches a year. So it makes a difference where you are, and the climate will change accordingly. The impetus for water development and the history of water that we'll talk about today has been population growth. People can't live without water, and as we grow enormously, you will see the heroic measures that have been put in place to uh, supply adequate water for Southern California. So what is the county's capacity for growth? Well, we know in 1769, we were probably dealing with roughly 20,000 people, all living off local water, from our watersheds to our main river, San Diego River, several other rivers as well in the county. And that was enough for at least subsistence type living. Fast forward 2020, we're talking about over 3.3 million people, with most of our water supply, in fact, almost all of it, maybe 90%, coming from elsewhere, places like Northern California watersheds and the Colorado River. What is next? I can't tell you. Maybe some of you have an answer or a vision for where we will be, but perhaps we'll have a better idea after this presentation. So we're going to back off from focusing, as we have in our previous presentations, on the central area of San Diego City, and talk in more broad sense, supplying water and the history of water in the county. And we have a very large population, 3.3 million. I'd like to make a comment on a watershed. Watershed simply collecting areas, and usually it's like if you visualize a cup collecting water, let's see, from rain or from groundwater into this vessel, which then feeds into a much larger uh, uh, body of water. Um, we don't have a lot of natural lakes, so we built a lot of dams and lakes, so that this is what happens, and this is the watershed for the San Diego River. There are 7 watersheds in the county. This is the second largest, and just give you an idea of how many communities are within this watershed and are affected by flooding and issues related to the San Diego River. There are 5 dams, reservoirs in this watershed, and the largest dam in the county, which has over 50 dams, is the San Vicente reservoir up in this area, north of Lakeside. When we talk about water history, we're going to bring in some of the things that we've talked about in the past, and one thing early on, we talked about the early explorers and the fact that they investigated the port areas such as Mission Bay area, which they called False Bay, and here the first explorer, the second explorer really, Vizcaíno in 1602, talked about a good port at the entry, although it was only 2 fathoms deep, which is only 12 feet. There was a large grove, which meant that along this river, there was a good deal of vegetation. There was this river, and referred to many indigenous people. 162, 167 years later, another member of the original expedition to colonize this area, Father Juan Crespi, also did a little exploring at False Bay. And he said, when we reached the port, we found about a league distance, which is about 3 miles, a good river with sufficient water, but in a few days it ran dry. So we know that for many centuries, the variability was of water in the river, and the area was quite present. We also remember about the saving of the Spanish expedition in 1769 by the Kumeyaay, who shared their water resource at the foot of Presidio Hill. That certainly was a history maker and a history changer. These Spanish would have been unlikely to survive without this supply of fresh water. So let's talk about. Well, it's so hard. There's so many things to talk about. We talk about dams. So let's talk about the first dam that was built in the county, Mission Dam, which is still there. You can see in 1937, part of the dam. Of course, it's not in the shape that it was when they first built it, but it was built. Its location right now is in Mission Trails Regional Park. It's built to provide water for the Mission San Diego, which moved from Presidio Hill to its current location. And they built an aqueduct, which was about 6 miles long, and that aqueduct was completed in around 1816, 1817. And it brought water from the dam, from the river down to Mission. And that was very important because there were many heads of cattle and people living there at that time. So we will talk about lots of things, and all these things have acronyms associated with it. If you get into the literature, you will be inundated by this, but you will get accustomed to the acronyms and what they refer to. Even in articles in the newspaper, you'll see that the local San Diego County Water Authority could be referred to as Water Authority, or sometimes even SDCWA. This is the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. We'll talk more about these here. So I'm just pointing out now some of the ways that that people refer to these agencies, the State Water Project, which brings us water from Northern California, sometimes called the Water Project, the state project. But you get the idea. Um, my favorite is this Fizz Drip, the first San Diego River Improvement Project. Towards the end of our presentation, I will talk a little bit more about that. And first, San Diego Water Company, first water company in the area in 1872. Sometimes referred to as SDWC. But this is just tip of, excuse me, the iceberg. Well, let's talk a little bit about the basics. So we'll talk about Water 101 here. You need to collect water, right? The idea is to deliver the water and is usually somewhere that people aren't living, is where the water is located, and trying to deliver that water to where people are. And it turns out that in our case here in San Diego County, most of the population is away from where most of the rain occurs. And so there's a need for transfer. So you have a collection from various sources, some old sources like rain, some new sources like desalination water. The storage, as I mentioned, over 50 dams, reservoirs in the county. Some of these dams are for daily use, that they go into the flow to get purified water at the tap. Others are just for emergency use, severe drought, and that sort of thing. Uh, these bodies of water need to transfer water from these bodies to uh, other places, such as treatment plants and homes. So you have a very intricate system of pipelines. They call pipelines, canals, aqueducts, sluices. You'll see all these terms as well. There are treatments for primary potable water, recycled, a different sort of treatment or limited treatment for sewage. And finally, delivery to the customer, which may be you to drink. It may be for your lawn to drink. It may be for the ocean to swallow. So we will talk a lot about this here, but I just want you to know that in a 200-year span, some very impressive things happened from the start of the first dam in 1807, the Mission Dam, all the way to 2001, when the emphasis shifted from collecting water and dealing with floods to another area dealing with recreation and restoration of habitat. And in between, many organizations and agencies were formed. And we'll talk about most of them. Just to emphasize a point that it's really hard to find water and get water into the city. The San Diego Flume Company, 1888, 89, built a trestle of 36 miles from the Cuyamacas. They built an earthen reservoir to collect water, and this was all a wooden structure. I believe it was all redwood, and it was gravity driven. This is the longest section, about 1,700 feet, the Las Cochas trestle. For the most part, none of this exists anymore. A few pieces of the track in some museums. And this delivered over this 36-mile path to somewhere in the La Mesa area. They even had flume rides, and I don't know how they stopped the carriages, but I guess they did. Here's, I believe, on opening day, Governor Robert Waterman in the high hat in the front seat here, taking a spin. Um, uh, the first of the really modern dams, it's the Sweetwater Dam, built around 1888. And the brief history behind this, you might recall I mentioned in conjunction with National Ranch, National City Development, Frank Kimball was involved, as well as the San Diego Land and Town Company, which is a subsidiary of the investors from the Santa Fe Railroad who were in town. And they owned a lot of property. They knew that they couldn't sell the property if there wasn't enough water for people to survive on. So they built this reservoir and then in the Sweetwater area, mostly concrete wall with um, dirt and rock on the edges. And this is what the Sweetwater Dam looked like in 1916 when the largest storm we've ever had here came. The whole side of the where the earth pack was caved in, and all this water just rushed out. The dam was rebuilt in the next few years. There's another dam, the lower Otay Dam, which is still in existence, but it had to be rebuilt because during the same storm, it was totally collapsed. So yes, 1916. That was the second year of the San Diego Exposition. And we were in the midst of a huge drought, maybe 15 years from the turn of the century. And it was so bad here that literally people were praying for rain. And the city of San Diego heard about this rainmaker, Charles Hatfield, from some of his other exploits, and invited him to town, and they struck a deal that they would pay him $10,000 for uh, uh, causing rain. So he accepted the deal, and he started doing his magic. You can see here he's mixing several chemicals. You know that these chemicals probably were not flammable, as he is smoking a cigar. He built these several of these towers, mostly out in the Lake Morena area, and put the chemicals up there. And this was the early part of January 1916. He was quite successful. As you can see, Old Town was pretty much underwater, at least part of it. This is a bridge that connected the South County to North County near Old Town. It was completely destroyed. The Otay River expanded. They received in 2 waves of rain. One was 6 days long, another maybe roughly the same length, starting at the middle of the month. Old Town received probably its season average of 8 to 10 inches of rain. Out in the mountains, there were areas that received as much as 40 inches in the two storms, and it was a mess. And there was a lot of destruction and there was some loss of life. And Mr. Hatfield decided he still wanted to get paid, so the city said, "Well, we'll pay you the 10,000, but you need to take the liability for property and loss of life." And so that didn't go down real well. And he, in fact, left town, but eventually, I believe he received a payment of $5,000. So that was our interaction with a rainmaker, uh, and um, and the concept of too much water, which happens on occasion here. In other words, we get flooding. So here we have, in the middle of this drought, 1906, we still had enough rain that overflowed the river in Mission Valley. 1978, more modern times. Here's a highway crossing the river with water running over it. The Otay River uh, also overflowed, as did many other of the major rivers in the county. So too much water, yes, that can happen as well. So let's go back now and talk a little bit about the population increase and how that uh, drove the development of the water system. Uh, by 1900, there were roughly 17,000 people in the city of San Diego, maybe twice that much in the county. Um, and we really couldn't provide uh, enough water from the San Diego River wells, which is what the source of the water was basically, and rain. So a lot of thoughts started occurring early in the 1900s to find uh, a way to transport water from outside the county. And so here we get to the story of our major water agencies that we have briefly alluded to before. 1928, the Metropolitan Water District forms. Population of the county here was about 200,000 people. Um, the County Water Authority formed 1944. There were over 300,000, and they formed basically to become one of the member agencies of the Met, because, of course, they were going to be uh, maybe the besides Los Angeles, the major user of this water. So from 44 to 47, an aqueduct or pipeline was built from MWD down to San Diego. The Mountain Metropolitan Water District built the San Diego, sorry, the Colorado River Aqueduct, well over 200 miles long, from one of the dams on the Colorado River bordering Arizona. So the Water Authority, in conjunction with the U.S. Navy, uh, uh, built the first of the pipelines for the San Diego Aqueduct, which brought water down to this area. And so in 1947, through that aqueduct, that was the first delivery of Colorado River water. About 500,000 people lived in the county at that time. Now, there was one other agency which turned out to be the largest of the three, a state water project, the California State Water Project, the largest supplier of energy and water in the United States. So that begins construction in the 1950s. We have now about 1 million in the county. And as you can see, it took 20 years for that to link up with the Met, which then linked up with the County Water Authority pipeline to get water from the State Water Project, 1.7 million people here. The water from the SWP is Northern California water that basically comes from snowpack up in the Sierras. So that's why it's so important when we think about droughts and what is the snowpack up in Northern California and the Sierras. So we just talked showing words on slides. So here's what, for example, Mission Valley looked like over the years. 1874, just fields, pretty much agriculture. 1916 doesn't look really a whole lot different. It's just the scene is different. 1960, you can see a little bit more development. And this is about the time when there was a really big effort starting to develop in Mission Valley. And with the development came lots of concrete, and we'll talk a little bit about how that affects the ability to plan for flooding. 2001, more modern times, if you look closely, I believe this is USD at the top of the hill. So we're looking north across the valley. Some foliage, and in 2001, as I indicated, that started to become an issue of preservation in the area. So getting back to the pipeline, so we talked once again about all these agencies. So this is what some of the construction looked like. The San Diego Aqueduct going north-south, basically a pipeline, tunnels through mountains. It was quite an undertaking. As I said, the U.S. Department of Navy was involved here. Now, in all these projects, especially the Met and the San Diego, there was a lot of funding from the government, including from the Bureau of Reclamation. And finally, in 1947, this is probably the northern section of the aqueduct, because that's the only area where the water is really on the surface. And I wish I had more information on this, because it's an interesting slide and what this body of water is, but it's somewhere near the north in the junction between the San Diego Aqueduct and the Colorado River Aqueduct. Okay, so now we'll drill down a little bit more, and let's see what it kind of looks like in a schematic way. This is a map. The Colorado Aqueduct runs this way through the southern part of Riverside County, and there are now 2 aqueducts. This is the first one that was built, and the second one. And you can see from the blue lines, there are connections between the 2 of them and between the aqueducts and local agency, water agencies. It's quite an elaborate system, most of which you really can't see. You can see the surface water in the dams and reservoirs, but pretty much pipeline conveyance. This is the San Vicente reservoir in the San Diego River watershed, and then further down the end of the second aqueduct, which is in the lower Otay reservoir. Okay, this is a slide that's meant to look at and not really read. It's one of those slides that you kind of grumble about. But anyway, focus on the red triangles. The red triangles are the dams that were in place at this particular time. I believe this is from the 2002 document, but nevertheless, just look at all the other lines that are going back and forth, up and down, east, west. These are all conveyances of water, either to treatment plants or to local water agencies for their deliverance to their customers. This is like the unknown, the underground of the system. Very intricate, something that we don't think about at all, but that's why it's so important when you hear about upgrading infrastructure like sewer pipes and that sort of thing. It really is important to maintain this system because it's so complicated. And finally, in this slide, you can get a picture of all the agencies that I've been talking about. This is a map of the state water aqueduct system. And this is the beginning of the state water project or state project, or called the California Aqueduct. This is the delta up in Sacramento, from the Sacramento and Feather Rivers. And this feeds down over 400 miles to the Colorado River Aqueduct interface. And this runs through, the purpose of this water project was to bring water from Northern California through the Central Valley, probably the most literally fruitful agricultural area in the United States, and then on down to Southern California, which has the two largest cities in the state. That's why it's so important to be able to deliver water from a number of sources. Here's the Colorado River Aqueduct that runs 220 miles or more down into conjunction where the San Diego Aqueduct brings water to our area. Just as a side comment, if you remember a couple of years ago, the Oroville Dam Spillway collapsed. It was part of this system of water supply, and this is where it's located, north of Sacramento. Okay, so this is my attempt to bring all the information I just presented to you back into one slide. When this gets posted, you can make a screenshot of this here. In my estimation, it's the best. It certainly helped me understand a lot about the history of water, including a lot about the politics and the pulling between agencies. Look how many agencies are involved, local agencies that have different, maybe microclimates, different needs of water, vying for their share of the water pie, and how intricate these three agencies must be, and trying to interact with one another. No wonder there's been a lot of tugging and a lot of suing and a lot of legal stuff going on, especially between the Met and the County Water Authority. So the SWP, and now the focus is San Diego County, is the conduit for Northern California water. So they ship the water down through the Central Valley to the Met. The Met, with all its agencies, kind of disperses the water. Some of the reservoirs, as I alluded to before, are reservoirs that are used for emergencies only, others for dispersal of water in real time. So from San Diego viewpoint, 30%, the mixture of water that we receive is 30% North California water, 70% Colorado River water comes through NWD down to our area. And there is one other very, very important player, which was the last piece that I had to learn. Um, the Imperial Irrigation District, Imperial County, has a pipeline, a pipeline directly from the Colorado River into Imperial County. There are two canals that were built in the county. One called the All-American Canal, which goes east-west along the border. If you've driven on I-8, you see the canal right off the highway, and the All-American Canal, which comes off that, I'm sorry, the Coachella Canal that goes north, and that comes into the Colorado Aqueduct. So we have a long-term agreement with Imperial County to deliver water. It is actually now the largest supplier of Colorado River water to San Diego County. But here's the clinker. It has to go through the Met in order for it to be delivered to San Diego County. San Diego County does not have a pipeline directly to the Colorado River. So there's a fee for this water transfer. There's a fee for this water transfer, for this. Part of the reason why it's so expensive to use water here. There is a plan in place that's moving to a second phase, dealing with the logistics of building a pipeline from San Diego County directly to the Colorado River. That will take next phase at least a year and a half. So this is a longer term project, but that's what they're trying to do to become less dependent on the MWD from a cost standpoint, from a legal standpoint. They may be able to eliminate headaches. In 2035, it's projected that we'd be only 2% dependent on the MWD for water, whereas now we're probably 40%, 50%, somewhere in there. So, okay, we're back to floods. You either have floods, you have collections of water, you have drought. So we're going to talk a little bit about all these dams that have been built, and so how effective are they in preventing dams from overflowing, from dams from preventing floods. So you probably can say not completely. It's kind of hard to determine whether floods have been prevented. We do know that floods continue to occur, but you have to kind of look at what kind of floods. Are these floods like massive floods along the whole length of a river, or are these floods that occur in local areas, so that maybe the issue is not necessarily dam prevention by dams, but local projects that might be necessary. And so more likely amelioration is happening. There's a flood mitigation plan that's in place for the city. It's not clear how effective that will be. I'm not quite sure whether it can be measured or how it would be measured, but there's some data from a 1980 flood looking at the flow rates and projected flow rates from three dams, and it showed a dramatically decreased flow rates because of the presence of the dam. And back to our friend FISDRIP, which was a project developed both for several reasons: to prevent floods, to restore habitat, to provide recreation, and it appears to have done all that. It's received awards for the project award. And if you go online, I don't have any photos, but if you go online, you'll be able to find um, some really nice pictures of this area. I have yet to go down there. I need to do it because I've seen the plans of the place and the photos. It's really a neat project, but it's only 7,000 feet long. It occurs between Qualcomm Way and 163. So here's an example where it looks like there's an effective um, uh, project for flood control, for habitat restoration, for recreation, but in a limited area. And this is why it's so important to be able to get the jurisdictions together along the river to be able to do multiple projects like these here to control um, flooding. And so the current water efforts include both the recreation and habitat issues, alternative sources, and in particular, you've probably heard of the Pure Water Project. It's in the first phase in North County. It's projected that in maybe a couple of decades, it will um, uh, produce up to a third of potable water use in uh, in the county. So that's really quite exciting for our area and some of these other sources, the desalination as well. Uh, uh, but these cost money, and one of the problems is that the more involved the technology is, the more costly. And so whether th- these efforts result in decreased water rates, I can't predict. The one thing I want to point out about the recreation development, this River Park Foundation, 2001, this is this agency, the San Diego River Conservancy, which is a state agency, um, uh, also have members, just like the water resources. The Met has a number of members because they have to serve different areas. Likewise, because of the many jurisdictions along the river, there are different member agencies or foundations, if you will, that uh, deal with their locale and how to make a literally a river-long river park. And so the floodplain plans may very well end up focusing on more of these local projects. One last comment, we kind of talked around the Colorado River. What I want to do is just indicate to you about the water use. We know that the Colorado water quality has gone down. The volume of the river has gone down. How long can we be dependent on it? Well, let's go from 1991 to 2035 projection. This is water use from all sources. It's this unit TAF, which is something you have to get your mind around. TAF, 1,000 acre feet, 325,900 gallons. It's equivalent to a 1 foot deep water on a football field. Probably the best way to imagine that. And we use many TAFs. So you can see over this period of time, the amount of water has increased, but maybe, what is that, 20%, 15%? Of the total Colorado water, this is the percentage of Colorado water that is projected or has been used in the past. It's gone from almost 70% down to less than half of all the water that we use for everything in the county. But that's still almost half. And so even projected in 2035, the alternate sources of water, recycling, reuse, potable reuse, still has these technologies have a way to go to produce the volumes of water needed so that we are not quite dependent on Colorado River water. We don't know what the future of the Colorado River is, and this is probably too high a number for us to feel comfortable. So what about the future? Well, Colorado River issues, still have flood controls, how much politics will get in the way, our friend, the ocean contamination issue around the border, and hopefully the continuation of the restoration of habitat and recreational areas along the river, along this river, along other rivers. These are things that we can think about the future. And one other item, that pipeline, of course, from San Diego County directly to Colorado River. Yes, there's still more to do, but I'm not sure we can hang around like this guy and wait for the contamination to disappear. We really need to keep vigilant and active in despite all the things that are distracting in our world today. We still need to pay attention to water development and our future. So with that, I will stop at this point and thank everybody for their participation, and look forward to some of your questions, which probably could be very challenging. So I'll turn it back to Katie. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Barry. Thanks for everyone for joining us. So it looks like we have one question and one comment to get us started. The question is from Donald Dodson, saying, asking whether or not you had come across in your research any realistic plan to increase protection of our two outside sources from earthquakes, as they both cross major fault lines.
I can't comment on that. These plans, document plans, are really involved, and honestly, it's hard to get into them. You have to kind of be almost scholarly about this here. But there are plans that include commentary on things like faults. earthquakes. Thank you.
This one, I'll come back to the comment in just a second, but this question from Peter Stilquist is kind of similar / related. And he asked what the implications of a major earthquake would be to our water supply.
That's really an infrastructure question, and I can't answer that. It's not an aspect of my water presentation that I've really been able to get into. I'm sorry, it is extremely important. I don't have the answer to that. I'm sure it's on radar, but I don't know what active plans there are.
So the comment was from Sandy Woodhouse about halfway through the presentation. And they said, I believe those early Spanish explorers thought that the port was San Diego Bay, where the river emptied frequently. False Bay was basically a tidal marsh with the tempting river entrance that would have been visible to travelers arriving from the north. Development of Derby's Dike created a long-term river entrance to the False Bay, and then dredging created the Mission Bay. So just a comment.
Yes.
The next question is from Robert Hudson. He was asking how many dams are in the San Diego area.
The county has over 50. None of them are federally, none of them are state owned. I think there may be several that are federally owned, but and none of them are county owned. They're owned by the municipalities.
Ooh, that's kind of interesting and a little bit unexpected. H. Weiss asked about the Carlsbad desalination plant and how that might impact local supply.
Well, it's projected that that by 2035, something like 10 or 12% of our potable water will be supplied by the desalination plant.
The next question comes from Theodore Stratham. A lot of the diversification programs of the SDCWA since the 80s were partly designed to protect the region from disruption to supply in the event of a disaster such as an earthquake. So back to the discussion around whether or not an earthquake may or may not have a significant amount of disruption. So it does look like they have some fail safes in place. Oh, thank you for that, Theodore.
Mm-hmm.
The next question came from Diane. Is there a conflict about sharing Colorado's river supply with Mexico?
With Mexico? You just happen to hit the one area that I haven't done much research at all on. What I know of is that the Colorado Delta is pretty much gone in Mexico. So they're not, I can't imagine that they're getting much water from the Colorado. But I really, that's a good question. And I'm going to look that up and do some research on it, but I don't have the answer.
The next is a comment from David Bloxham about desalination and a little bit touching on the problem of pollution in the ocean. He says Mexico pollution is not the problem for using ocean water for drinking water. The largest hurdle for desalination development on the coast is surf riders and the Coastal Commission. I personally don't know enough about that to comment. He goes on to say the Carlsbad desalination plant is the prime example. Also, most desalination plants filter water well enough that sewage is completely filtered out. So that, going back kind of to a couple of questions ago. And we have another comment on the Mexico question from Theodore. Mexico is guaranteed an allotment under a 1944 treaty with the U.S., but the sticking point has often been the quality of water delivered, as withdrawals from the Colorado River have increased the salinity of the water left in the river by the time it reaches Mexico. So in response to the question that was a little bit earlier from, I believe,
Yes.
Anne. Yeah, so it does sound like there's been some issues there. The next question is from Anne. What can you tell us about the company that built the very first dam in 1871? What were its intentions? Development of the watershed for agricultural use? And do you know what happened to the question? And she writes that this is from John Schlosser.
The first dam that I'm aware of after Mission Dam was the the Cuyamaca Dam in the late 17, you said 17, I'm sorry, 1871. I think the only dam that was in place at that time was probably the old Mission Dam. Then in the late 1880s was really when the other dams were being built. So at the Sweetwater Dam, the Cuyamaca, roughly the same time period. The Cuyamaca or San Diego Flume Company dam, that flume was to in large part serve Mission Valley and the city, and so that was the real intention. And I guess eventually it became kind of a political question when other water companies came online as to who is going to really be the prime customers. But when it first started, that Cuyamaca company had intentions of supplying Mission Valley agriculture with water. Does that answer the question? Or
I think so. I think the question seemed to be largely aimed at what it was used for, and if it was going toward Mission Valley. Yeah, it makes sense that it was more.
yeah, and the city, also the city. Yep.
So feel free to type back out and see if let us know if we answered the question. The next one is from Bill Fish. In the meantime, is there any scientific conclusion that Charles Hatfield's releasing of whatever it was he released into the air actually produced rainfall, let alone the ensuing deluge? Or is the consensus that it was just a coincidence?
As far as I know, there's no compelling information to link the storms with what he did. But I don't know enough of climatology to know whether part of the principle that he was using was cloud seeding, for example. So I don't, technologically, I don't know what he was trying, whether he knew what he was trying to do, but I don't think that there are probably consensus is that it didn't have to do with what he was doing. I guess I'll leave it at that.
It's kind of an interesting question, Did he do what he promised to do? The next one is from H. Weiss, kind of question comment, saying thank you. It was an interesting overview. And then he wants to ask if we want to mention interesting historical photos on Hatfield and the Water Pray for Rain scheme. He said there's a great exhibit at the San Diego Downtown Library Special Collections, and he wants to know if we have any photos on the issue.
No.
I haven't seen personally what's down in special collections at the public library, but I do know that here at the History Center, we do have photos of Hatfield. We have photos of the flood. We have a bunch of historic photos from that time, so it's fairly well documented, I believe. let's see. The next one comes from David Miller. What role did Ed Fletcher play in San Diego water development? I see the Fletcher name everywhere. And is there any relation to the current San Diego politicians?
Uh, I, I don't know the relationship to the current Fletcher, but yes, Fletcher uh, worked with a fellow named Murray. In fact, Fletcher, without checking with Murray, actually named that lake Lake Murray. They were business partners during, I guess, the early 1900s. But that's Fletcher was involved in some of these water company deals. There was a lot of competition that was going on between various water companies. John Sprickles owned a water company. We didn't even have a chance to talk about that. Um, but there was a lot of politics for sure going on between water companies, and Fletcher and Murray were involved in that part of the history.
All right, our next question comes from Dr. James Smith. He says that we live on Lake Murray, already in place 1895, then a concrete dam after the Hatfield flood. Do you have any comments on its place in the watershed system?
Which dam?
The one on Lake Murray.
Lake Murray?
Mm-hmm.
No, I couldn't answer that.
And David Buxom also wanted to comment just real quick that the History Center on our website, we do have a great deal of information on Colonel Ed Fletcher's involvement in the water companies and stuff like that. So
Yep.
if anybody did want to do a little bit more of a deep dive, you can definitely get started on our website. Well, it looks like that's all the questions that have been asked thus far. So I think since we are all out of questions, we will go ahead. Oh, one more from Theodore. Oh, you seem to know a lot about this, Mr. Stratham. Fletcher's Coyamaca Water Company built the Lake Murray Dam. So, tying back in both Ed Fletcher and Lake Murray Dam, which is a multiple arch dam to replace the La Mesa Dam, an earthen dam that failed in 1916. So just so people are aware.
Yep.
Thank you for that. So actually, I think this is going to wrap us up, folks. Thank you so much for attending. I'm glad that everyone took the time to come out here. It was an interesting conversation as usual. It seems like it's been a very good back and forth lately. Thank you, Barry, for taking the time to give us the presentation. So please look out for our next presentation. I'm going to go. I have a whole bunch of links to drop on you guys. So the first one, and they're all going to be in the chat box if you'd like to take a look. The first one is the link to our next presentation, which is going to be on Balboa Park. And again, Barry is going to be the one to do it. So that is going to be, as he wrote on his last slide, Tuesday, February 9th from noon to 1, same time, same place. So that's in the chat box. The next thing I'm going to drop in is just a copy of the YouTube link that I'd put in at the very beginning for anyone that may have missed it. So if you want to check out this presentation later, or any of the previous presentations are not able to make the next one, I would definitely check that out. The last thing is obviously we're not charging anybody to come and attend here, but we still do need support, as always. So if you enjoyed what you saw and would like to contribute, I'm just going to drop the donation link, the link to our website that covers our donations, also just in the chat box. So also there is a journal article David Miller dropped in from the History of San Diego journal, and that will also be in the chat box. And it looks like it's about water without actually clicking into it just yet. So if you guys want some more information, definitely check out the journals. They're available on our website at www.sandiegohistory.org. And we'll see y'all next time. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, thank you very much. Stay safe.
Take care, everyone.